everybody. We're here for Ron Frost this morning. He's going to teach us about Buddhism. And most of you know Ron. If you don't know him, I've got a blurb about him in the notes on our Google Drive. He's been a teacher, amongst other things. I'll just say he was a teacher here at the university for a while. I think that's supposed to learn still. Here's both of them. I'm going to let real quick, at least give us our names and why you're here, and we'll go around and I'll turn it over to Ron.
Bernie, Brett, here.
I'm Rashida and I'm here to present about the Baha'i faith and hang out with you guys for the rest of the month. I'm Diane Martin. I'm part of the Reasons from Howell.
Angie Floyd, her sister.
And Parker.
And her.
Mary, program director for the Voices of Faith and Leadership.
And I'm Patricia, pastor at Frontier United Methodist Church, and part of the group. Yeah. Guess that, is there anything else?
Yeah.
I'm Barbara Maxwell from Wyoming, and I worked with Ron for several years.
And Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, and I'm just going to say we are recording and streaming, so we have folks online. If you could please speak up so that they can hear as well, when we, especially when we have questions, etc. And I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer for them.
Okay, I'm going to offer that if you needed to do that. Ron, you have the floor.
Okay. I think that Buddhism is so distinctly different from the Abrahamic religions that should go and describe the religions first. And the best description I know of was written by Rabbi Shapiro, who said that there can be only one Jesus, there can be only one Moses, there can be only one Muhammad. But everybody in the world has a potential for it.
The potential
Buddha. And all you have to do is do the training. So it's a non-theistic religion, the result of that. Now, the Buddhists call themselves non-theistic to make it very, very clear that they're not atheists. Okay, atheists say that there's nothing in reality except for this visible world that we can see. And Buddhists say, yes, there's a spiritual dimension, but they don't apply any personality to it. So as a result of that, they have no doctrine. You know, you don't have to believe in anything to be a Buddhist. You just have to sit down and do the practices and see how they affect you. And as a result of the fact that they have no doctrine, a lot of the really great teachers in the Christian tradition have done Buddhist practices. People like Thomas Merton and Thomas Keaton and Richard Rohr have all done an extensive amount of Buddhist practice. Rabbi Shapiro in the Jewish tradition has also done a lot of Buddhist practice. So it's a religion that can be transferred from one religion to another without doing any damage to the nature of Buddhism itself. Okay, so I'm going to hand out these notes because, well, first of all, because I'm dumb and I can't remember all this stuff. And secondly, because it's got all these sort of things that Buddhism Buddhism started out prior to the first maybe 1,000 years as an oral tradition. In order to keep people that they can memorize everything, they had just lists, lots of lists. So we don't know much about the Buddha. In fact, historically, they would say he lived someplace between the 4th and 6th century before Christ. which is not a pretty, not a tight, time scale at all. The myth is that he was born into a royal family and decided that, there's all sorts of things in the world that didn't fit to him, and he went out and sat under a tree and finally got enlightenment. And after he got enlightened, he said, well, how do I teach this to everybody? So he sat there for another couple of weeks before he figured out his teaching scale. And basically, Buddhism is based upon the Four Noble Truths. So, first noble truth is life is suffering. And it sounds pretty grim. But the translation of the word dukkha is sort of not being at ease. And like I've read, the dukkha is considered to be like trying to drive an ox cart where the wheels are not quite the same size. So there's a lot of drama in life. And the second noble truth is that we're suffering because we grasp to impermanent things and objects. We want things to be the way we want them to be. And when they're not the way we want them to be, we get unhappy about it. And the third noble truth is the cessation of suffering by realizing that you can let things go. You don't have to make them be the way you want them to be. So people say, oh, Buddhism is so depressing because it says life is suffering. The key thing is the third noble truth is that you can let that suffering go. And the fourth noble truth is the path towards cessation. Stronger meditation, but he had his eightfold path, which I've got listed below. The right view, which is very much of a Hindu view, right? Our actions have consequences. Death is not the end. And our actions and belief have consequences after death. In other words, there's karma. And the right aspiration is essentially to become a kind person and a gentle person by following the Buddhist path. The right speech, I think this is the kind of thing that Mr. Trump should hear. Get rid of the rude speech. You know, talk to people gently. Right action is the same sort of thing. Right livelihood is essentially a livelihood that does not hurt other people. And the right effort is a generation of wholesome mental states. And 7 and 8 are the key things, the right mindfulness and the right concentration. In other words, Buddhism, the major practice in Buddhism is mindfulness meditation. And through the mindfulness meditation, all the things that are driving you to grasp at stuff start getting eased. In other words, the reason why we're grasping at stuff, the reason why we want things to be the way we want them to be is largely our ego. Okay, we've grown up in such and such a way that we've developed this kind of persona, and then we want everything to be the way we want it to be. And that persona, that ego you have, is essentially just some empty thoughts. And the whole idea of meditation is to slowly realize the thoughts you have. The first thing you do in meditation is you realize a lot of the thoughts you have are empty. In other words, you're supposed to sit and be mindful of how your thoughts are. When thoughts come up, sometimes they're really delightful thoughts. You like to run with them, you know. My thing is, oh yeah, sometimes I think I'm on the beach in Hawaii, and you hear the waves, you hear the seagulls, and smell the air. And then when you realize it's just a thought, the seagulls disappear, the sand disappears, and you're back sitting. As you get better and better at meditation, you can do this for more and more thoughts that are stickier, as you would say, emotions. You can realize the emotion that's really bothering you because someone said something to you that you didn't really like. It's just an emotion, empty thoughts. So the whole idea of the meditation process is to lower that grasping mind of ego and making in the process making you a gentler and kinder person. Let's see. Well, I'll go to the various schools of Buddhism. So Buddhism was founded between 400 and 600 BC. It was founded as a process whereby the person would meditate, mostly monks, and essentially come to peace with all that ego stuff in their mind. So it was founded as a way of personal salvation, personal path to liberation. And that is called Hinayana Buddhism. Now, nowadays, people say, well, that's Hinayana. Yana means path, and Hinayana means narrow path. So a lot of people would say, well, that's sort of derogatory to the Hinayana people because the broader path people are obviously better, right? So a lot of people call it Theravada. The problem with this is that probably in the past, there are many, many, many schools of Hinayana Buddhism that have since died out. And a lot of the teachings of Theravada Buddhism sound like Mahayana Buddhism today. So, particularly in the West. So Mahayana Buddhism is a great path. It didn't develop until about 500 AD. And basically, the whole point in Hinayana Buddhism is for a person to become a bodhisattva and vow to liberate all beings. In other words, since you're a Buddhist, the whole idea is that sometime after death you're going to be reborn, maybe. And in Hinayana, you escape being reborn because you've already come to realization. And the point is that you don't have to be reborn if you don't think you need a body. If your mind is quite happy being in a disembodied state in a place that Christian would call heaven, then you don't have to be reborn. In the Mahayana process, people who have taken bodhisattva vows decide to get reborn because there's lots of people out there who need help. So they go out and they decide to get reborn so they could help people who are traveling in this state of what they call samsara. Now, unlike Hinayana, which has one school, the Theravada school, Mahayana has at least three. Zen it's called Zhan in Chinese. It's found in China and generally in Japan. And as I say here, it emphasizes transition beyond the scriptures. In other words, you sit and you sit and you sit until you get the realization that is hidden in all those scriptures. Vajrayana, well, you see here, Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Yana is a path, Vajra is diamond. So it's a diamond path. This is the official name of Tibetan Buddhism, but Vajrayana is also found in Japan, particularly, and also in good portions of Mongolia. And Bhagyan particularly involves extensive visualization. The deities they visualize come from Hinduism. In Hinduism, all those deities out there. In Tibetan Buddhism, all the deities are in here. In other words, by visualizing the deities, that helps you deal with all sorts of emotional and other problems that all of us have. And lastly is Pure Land Buddhism, which is based upon the fact that, hey, you know, I'm too weak. I can't do all this meditation stuff. So I'm going to pray to Amitabha Buddha, who is the Buddha of the Pure Land. So when you get reborn in the Pure Land, you can attain realization without having to worry about getting a job, doing things otherwise. So it's a major school in Japan. We talk here about Zen Buddhism, but the biggest Buddhist group in Japan is Pure Land. And it's also part of the Tibetan Buddhism practice of this Pure Land. So it's wandered around.
How did those groups get along with each other?
Well, it's very.
Did they fight like Christian denominations do?
No. What they I'm sure that Zen and Pure Land didn't get along because Zen means you sit down and you do it, and Pure Land says, "Don't worry, just go to work, chant Amitabha, and you get reborn in Pure Land." But all this stuff has come to the U.S. The Hinayana and all these schools, they're very compatible because they realize that what you were saying. Well, first off, when they've come to the U.S., they're disconnected from their culture. Okay, so the Tibetan schools definitely. I don't know if they competed violently, but they definitely compete against each other in Tibet. But in the U.S., you're just an isolated Tibetan. If someone is a different school than you, they're still Tibetan. They're still working on the same problems. I mean, the differences in the school in Tibet, essentially the kind of meditations you do and stuff like that. And that's not really that important when it's in the U.S. is a minor thing. But so in the West, I just heard a talk by one of the Westerners who did all this studies in Theravada and Buddhism, and it was all about being a bodhisattva, which of course is Mahayana Buddhism. So a lot of this stuff is being shared in the modern West because, as I said, it's detached from their cultural base.
So Tibetan Buddhism has a Dalai Lama
He
as sort of the
he's the head of
head
yeah. Well, that has four head guys. I don't know. I can't remember. He's the head of one school of Buddhism.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
the Karmapa is the head of another school, and there's a Sakya school, and I don't know who's the head of that.
Okay, so basically each school does have
A head,
sort of a
right?
head. Okay.
Sometime in the 16th century, the school which has Dalai Lama the head became the ruling school for politics in Tibet.
Ah.
But the center down there in Red Feather was founded by Trungpa Rinpoche, who came from the Kagyu school of Tibet. But we've had the Dalai Lama there simply because the differences between the various schools are trivial compared to the differences between the schools where they were in Tibet and, you know, each other. So,
Which school do you practice and what does that look like?
well, it's the Kagyu school, which is called the practice school. So it's actually has a lot of close ties to Zen.
Okay.
Even though obviously in Tibet they never have a close tie to Zen. So it's just based a lot upon just doing the meditation and getting the realization from the meditation. So there are the questions. The maybe what I'll do. I'm gonna mention this.
I gave these out earlier, so they should have their books.
Gave these books out to everybody. I decided to have this book here, actually, donate this book to the group because, in my mind, it's a primer for interfaith behavior. As you can say, more interfaith stuff we cover. You know, if you look carefully, you can see it's a record of my transition from being an atheist to a Buddhist to interfaith practice. One of the points that I make in the book is that religion is based upon the spiritual experience. And it's designed in this mystical sense to bring someone who's a practitioner to the mystical experience. The trouble is, the mystical experience is totally beyond concept. And therefore, when you describe the experience or the practices you do to get to the experience, you only get in half the truth, or part of the truth. In other words, there's no way you can say that a Christian has a better religion than a Muslim. Both of them are working toward the same experience. And to distinguish the experience between the two as something that's different is just not understanding the nature of religion. Yeah. Last week on KUWR, Wyoming public radio station, they have a weekly debate. And one was a weekly debate about whether religion is good or bad. And there wasn't a debate. But, you know, if you have the view that my religion is better than anybody else's religion, it's probably not very good. You're likely to lead into situations where you either verbally or maybe physically abuse other people. If you come to the realization that religion is a way to see what's beyond reality, then it's good. Because somehow we have to get beyond this physical realm to understand what's in the spiritual realm. So what I like in here, I use this several times in here, is a Zen proverb that says, when the wise man points at the moon, all the fool sees is the finger. So all the religions are fingers pointing at the moon. And if you're fighting over the fingers, you don't realize that the moon is there. And that's what, you know, that's what that debate was all about. It was like, no, it's not a debate. No, I would say that Christian nationalism is not religion. it's political. And to them, mystical experiences just don't exist, right? It's trying to take dogma and put it into the way they make into politics. So that's the reason why I thought, you know, this is a good thing for someone who wants to be in a interfaith network to understand. And if you brought your book, I'm happy to autograph it.
And he did give us these books.
Nice, thank you.
Yes.
Well, sure, you have good salesman.
Yeah. Oh, that you had to
No, not.
What drew you to Buddhism?
Because it was the only one that didn't have a doctrine. I mean, just say, so, I mean, I've had lots of religious experiences as the first pages describe. Yeah, I had one. I was doing field work out in the Laramie Range, and I was walking along in this arroyo, which is all full of rock fragments. And this voice said to me, "Are you going to pick up the arrowhead or not?" And I looked around and looked around. There was nothing but gravel pieces. And then I looked really careful. I'm a geologist, you know, and I saw, oh, that little fragment there is chalcedony. It's not granite. So I reached down this little fragment and picked up this beautiful iron, but it was mostly hidden. So where did that voice come from? I don't know. But so I have a what should I say? Maybe the boundary between reality or the physical world and the spiritual world is a little bit thin for me. So, but you know, after I've had all these experiences, I read the Bible and said, "There's nothing in there. It's just these guys think these guys, and God's gonna make them all die." You know, it's very violent. So I just said that's not for me. And then when I got to UW, someone had posted this poster about a weekend retreat in Buddhism. I said, "I'll give it a try." And you know, as soon as I said, "This is it."
Would you say you were searching for something spiritual that you could connect to?
Yeah.
So it wasn't a surprise. You went hunting for it.
I was looking for it, yes.
But partly because the physical and the spiritual is thin for you.
Yeah.
That barrier is thin for you.
We have a question from online. So it says, with regards to the Four Noble Truths, is it possible that wanting things the way you want them to be could be translated as expectation? I want many things a certain way, but I usually don't expect any of them to be so. The times that I do is when I've experienced or witnessed suffering. I'm not so convinced that the wanting itself causes the suffering.
Well, the answer's in the question. Because the person who asked that question also said, you know, I don't expect them to be exactly the way I want them to be. You know, if it happens, fine. Because we all have expectations, even if it's just about Christmas presents. You know. But the question is whether you tie all those expectations to your ego so it makes it happy when it happens and it's not happy when it doesn't happen.
When I think of suffering, I think it's the noble truths that mention the suffering aspect. I think primarily I think of grief from death, husband, wife, somebody close to you. What then does a Buddhist do with grief? Because to me that is suffering.
Well, that is a tough a tough problem. I've got a great story on this. One of the translators that brought Buddhism from India to Tibet was and he had a bunch of students and everything. And his son said, died, and he went to great grief. And the students were saying, we thought that you said that life is just an illusion. And he said, yes, it is, but it's a very realistic one. So yeah, I mean, one thing, basically in teaching is, first off, when someone dies, their body dies, but their mind and person, they go on. Of course, that means that the grief is mostly the sense of loss to yourself. That person's going on something different. And that's, that's something that you would, during meditation, you live with it. You say, okay, I feel really, really bad that my father died. And that's a process of essentially working with your mind, dealing with the fact that you have lost something that you really, really attach. It's really grasping, isn't it? You're really attached to. And the interesting thing is, all religions say that that person moved on. We've got a meditation group that meets here on Wednesday. 2 weeks ago, one of the people brought a tape of an article about this book that's just been written by a doctor about I should say, the dreams and the visions that people have as they're dying. And the title of the book is Death is But a Dream. And it astounds me because I've seen all these things happening at hospice. People are in communication, people have already died, and they're on the other side. And so that also, I mean, one of the reasons why I do hospice volunteers is for myself, because I learned that death isn't just a switch you turn off and you're gone. There's something beyond it. And usually a lot of our people in hospice die in a very positive frame of mind, because they've been tied into that which lies beyond. So that's my own view of death. No, it'll be interesting when I die if I have the same view. But sorry, I won't be able to come back and tell you about that.
You will, out of kindness.
Well, if I do, that'd be quite something. No, but people do have dreams where people who are really, really close to them have died and you communicate with them. So here again, we're talking about something that's universal to religions. It's not just Buddhism, but there's a sense that there is something beyond this physical realm, and you can experience it by doing deep contemplative practices. And you might be able to experience it when you're in contact with people who have died elsewhere. I mean, I had this student, this patient, from hospice, who died. He lived out. in the prairie, south of town. House had a really great view of the medicine boats. And I was there as sort of the 12th hour person to wash the body and get the undertakers there and everything. As I went there, I was talking to the daughter, and she said that he needed some medicine, so she went into the kitchen to grind up the pills or something, put them in the water. And she came back, he was dead. And outside the window, she said, it was the largest antelope herd she'd ever seen. She said, well, they came to take him away. And at the Laramie Hospice, we will occasionally have a big buck show up after someone's died, walking around the parking lot.
In the parking lot?
In the parking lot. So, death is a real mystery. And that is a basic aspect to religion. To understand it, or to accept the mystery. You don't have to understand it, because it's a mystery. But to accept the fact that there is a mystery to it, and that ties you in with that whole dimension of spiritualism. So we've gotten a long way from Buddhism.
Or have we?
Well, no, yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. As I said, it's the it is one path to get tied in with the spiritual dimension. The very fascinating thing, I came back, I was on a 3-year retreat in Nova Scotia, a monastery. I was doing a 3-year retreat in Tibetan Buddhism. So I'd been a monk for the duration of the retreat. I came back and I was talking to Sally Palmer, and I was telling her about, a great meditation. And she said, Ron, you have to read Thomas Keaton. And I read Thomas Keaton. It's like, whoa, you changed the name, it's exactly the same. The same practice. And so the point is, the contemplative practices, there are contemplative practices in Judaism as well, and of course in Sufism, the contemplative practices are the same. The doctrines that people use to describe them are different, but the practices are the same. So when you encounter groups of contemplatives from all sorts of different religions, they have no trouble interacting with each other because they're not dealing with the doctrines, they're dealing with the experience they have by doing the practices. Yeah, so Thomas Keaton says that when you're doing these contemplative practices or contemplative prayer, you're tying in to the mind of God. When Buddhists tell you doing the contemplative prayer or meditation, you're tying in with the Dharmakaya, which is the spiritual dimension that creates everything. But to them, there's no personality to it. So they're saying exactly the same thing. So the practices are the key thing. And that's what led me go from, unfortunately, to write this book. You go from the fact that, boy, Buddhism is the greatest religion in the world. So the path is there for all these religions. So Christianity is not necessarily, white Christian nationalism.
No, it's not. Not at all. So Ron, can you describe what the Buddhist community is like in Wyoming?
Small. I like to say that we're on the frontier of Buddhism. There's several centers of Buddhism in Colorado. But there's a small number of people. I mean, we have probably a couple of dozen who meditate in Laramie. And there's a couple of people I've been in contact in Casper. I think I met someone from Wheatland. There's a group of Buddhists who meditate with the at the congregational, I mean, at the Unitarian Church in Cheyenne. Yeah. So, but it's not big.
What kind of formal structure? So the Wyoming group Buddhist
Yeah, there is no
community is
formal
very small, so there's no formal
There's
structure.
no formal structure at all.
If there was like in a more populated state or city, would there be a formal structure like Christians in various groups like that organize themselves into churches or congregations?
So there's actually 3 different meditation groups in Laramie, and they don't often mix.
So a meditation group or
Right.
a certain practice type of meditation,
Yeah.
or
And
is it personality? I get along with these people, so I'll go meditate with them versus.
Well, you know, for example, I've meditated with a group which is very Zen oriented, and I just thought that they were, what should I say, a bit severe. I met someone at a Buddhist conference, and he said, you know, it's all about discipline. Now, the people who are Zen have real discipline. The Tibetan people have their own idea of discipline. It's a little bit more open. So I just didn't feel as comfortable there as I do with our own group here. It's got no affiliation at all. We have people come, or the group who sit with us, we have about a dozen. People can volunteer to bring in a reading of anything. And yeah, if you throw in a reading on the Tao of Pooh, we'd all have good discussions. Even if it's sort of a, what should I say, the Tao of Pooh is sort of a joke. But yeah, so there are those schools of Buddhism that, for example, I think in Los Angeles is a very, very big and solid Pure Land school. Okay, and Pure Land doesn't really mix with the meditation groups because you're going to meditate after you die. So you just chant during the day and during the practices, and so to a certain extent, Pure Land sounds an awful lot like some types of Christianity. You pray to God that He's going to go to heaven when you die. But the interesting thing is, it developed in Japan in the 11th century, long before there's any contact with Christianity. So basically what it tells me is there is an aspect, a tendency during the development of religions to have this kind of Pure Land, what should I say, structure or
Stage in their development.
yeah, and you know, basically a devotional practice that is asking for relief from this world. Although it's not quite the same in the Pure Land. Every once in a while in the Tibetan stuff, I encounter Pure Land, but it's not the same in Tibet as it is in the big Pure Land churches that are in China and Japan. Los Angeles, for example.
So in Japan or in Asia, there are buildings, churches, something along those lines where people practice specific Buddhism.
Right, in other words, I'm sure that there's church type places in the Pure Land, but I don't know if they have any monastic tradition. In a lot of the other ones, they're more like temples.
Okay.
And what struck me when I was in China was this very active Buddhist practice in China.
In spite of the
Communist,
communism.
yeah, or maybe because of it.
Mhm.
I went to a talk. I think it was 2 weeks ago. On campus by this fellow who, Bob Potter, goes by Red Pine. He spent most of his life in China. He decided he was in graduate school in Columbia and decided that's not where I wanted to go. So he ended up going to a Buddhist monastery in Taiwan. And then after he's learned Chinese, he spent his life translating all these Chinese texts into English. And in the late 80s, he said, you know, there's all these stories about these hermits who live in the mountains in central China. He says, I wonder if they still exist. And he went in there and found them. And so that was 1989. I think he went out another time, and then in 2003, he went out there with a film crew, filmed them. And between 1989 and 2003, they had grown, the population had grown substantially. So in 89, most of the hermits were not too literate because they were products of the Cultural Revolution, where people just didn't go to school. And by 2003, he was finding bankers, professors, all sorts of people who gotten tired of the big rigmarole in China. Is really, you know, very hard to make a way in China these days. And they had gone in to become hermits, you know, and they're either practicing Buddhism or Taoism.
Mhm.
And what they would usually do, they'd go there for many years, and when they were had become realized, they go out and teach. So even in this extremely doctrinaire society of communist China, there's still people who are dropping out and becoming hermits. In fact, he pointed out that all the land these people are living on is, let's say, land is governed by the Chinese Communist Party. And the communists are letting this happen because it's a very important cultural part of China. It's gone back thousands of years.
So as a Buddhist, is it okay, or pardon me for knowing, but is it okay to meditate by yourself, or do you always have to meditate with a community?
I meditate every day by myself. I have gone on several solitary retreats.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is when I came back here and started talking to Sal Farmer, she says, "Wow, you have to come help me with this contemplative camp at La Forêt." So I've been helping run a contemplative camp for the United Church of Christ in La Forêt. And this spring, I was helping her with contemplative practices at the Episcopal Church. So I don't find any difference. Although, you know, I don't go for the doctrine, the practice is still the same.
Yeah.
You're all invited to contemplative.
Yes, I've got experience here.
See, I think in the Methodist tradition, we would call it silence camp. There's been
effort over a number of years to go to one of our church camps up on the Flathead in Montana. And they were there for a week, and they call it Silence Camp. But as I'm thinking about some of the activities that people have described, because I've never been able to attend, I'm thinking contemplative prayer, meditation. Okay, I'm reading sort of the circle that you have here on the front of your cup.
Right. Also, if you read, you know, in the later chapters, point out this history that a lot of this contemplative camp stuff, a lot of the contemplative practices in Christianity arose from Thomas Keaton.
Right.
In, I'd say, the late 60s, early 70s, almost in response to this huge outpouring of people becoming Buddhists or Hindus, because they really were attuned to the meditation practice. I mean, the reason why I became a Buddhist is I was totally turned off by Christianity. I mean, I've become a lot more attuned to it now, recognizing that there's an aspect of it that's not based upon, you have to believe in the Bible or you're going straight to hell. I mean, the earth is more than 6,000 years old. And so who was it? One of the Jewish people who they interviewed, and they pointed out that he became a Buddhist because he didn't recognize anything like that in Judaism until very recently, when a lot of the really deep mystical stuff in Judaism became more available to people who are not necessarily long-term practitioners. So there's this big change that's happened in, I'd like to say it's under the radar, or under the radar at the moment, but it's happened in all these churches to emphasize the contemplative aspects of the practice. And that's, to me, a very optimistic thing. I mean, one of our big problems in this world, in this society at the moment, is the incredible amount of materialism. Because it's in the title of the book.
I did see that.
I mean, and the counter to materialism is a spiritual background.
Yeah.
And you can't say religion, because religion sometimes means doctrine. And the spiritual stuff behind the doctrine is the key thing that's going to save us in the material world. And the fact that there's thousands of people doing meditation studies in the mountains of China, which has got to be the most materialistic society there is a good sign that we may be at the point where we can start changing around. And that's why we need to, why don't we interfaith?
A lot of this sounds like some of the basic tenets of Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, Narcotics Anonymous. In fact, somebody in my not my congregation, in the conference, told me recently those groups do church better than we do.
Yeah, right.
Because the serenity prayer, right? God grant me the serenity to accept the things that it cannot change. And that's what I hear you saying.
Right.
Is, you may be frustrated with fill in the blank, but there are some things in life you cannot change, just me personally. And then change what you can, and then the wisdom to know the difference. And that is exactly what I hear you saying.
Right.
And I started meditating probably 4 years ago, and it has changed my life.
Well, it's changed my life. I like to tell people that before I started meditating, I was like an actor out of the Sopranos, from New Jersey, you know, I had all that New Jersey arrogance and, you know, and impatience and get everything done, yeah.
Yeah, and I think our culture, at least the culture that I was living in prior to getting into ministry, the secular world is all about, you know, gain, get more money so you can spend. And then people get frustrated with, why am I not happy?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that all gets back to the materialism, that we can have as much stuff as anybody, but there's always going to be somebody who has more stuff than I do.
And just think of Mr. Trump, who's got lots of money.
Yeah.
And he's not a very happy person. In fact, I would tell you, Mr. Trump, you know, one of the interesting things about Buddhism is you can go to hell and not even die. If Mr. Trump is in hell.
He's living in hell right now.
Ron, we thank you so much. We are not stopping our conversations, but we are going to give the floor to Katrina here in a few minutes. So thank you so much. This is a thank you from Wynn and from all of us. Thank you for the book and everything you do.